Hello and welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. This week's episode is very, very UK specific in its actual activities, but not UK specific in terms of the goals, the aims, and the possible technological solutions to electricity distribution, cost, ownership, etc., etc. I think these are fairly universal things we're talking about now in relation to the greater and greater adoption of renewables and the utilization of the energy that is produced by them being used more creatively, more effectively, and simply more in the grid. And I'm really excited about what's happening in this space now, because for one thing, this episode is sponsored by an amazing company called Ripple Energy, who are building the UK's first consumer-owned wind farm. Really clever bit of economic as well as technological development and innovation. That's wonderful, and they are intrinsically linked with our guest today, who is Fiona Howarth, who is the CEO of electric vehicles at Octopus Energy. And Octopus Energy are really making a big impact in the UK at the moment, because they are one of the first companies that I know of. Now, I think there probably are similar arrangements in, for instance, Germany, that I may not be aware of, and I hope some of our listeners will inform me of that and correct me on that. Generally, our listeners and viewers on Fully Charged are very good at correcting us, particularly me, because I make quite a lot of errors. But what Octopus do is they have various tariffs, super economic tariffs. They only supply 100% renewable electricity. But one of their tariffs has been in the sort of news recently because of the very positive weather we've been experiencing in the UK as regards renewables. Quite a lot of sunshine, quite a lot of wind. We've had very high amounts of renewables going into our grid mix, over 50% on numerous times, up to I think 61% of the country during the day, during a working day, was powered by renewables. Well, there's all sorts of caveats you need to put into that, which we discuss about, the lockdown and how that's reduced demand in certain areas but increased it in others, whatever. That means that there's an enormous variation in cost, and you can have an Octopus Energy supply that varies along with the wholesale cost of electricity. And this is a fascinating area. But, as I said, this episode is sponsored by Ripple. And Ripple have built their first wind farm it's an area called Graig Fatha in South Wales, and it's currently open for ownership. So you can buy a piece of that wind farm today. And you don't just buy it so you can walk around going, I own some wind farm, and I'm virtue signalling my wind farm ownership. No, don't tell anyone you own it, because you're getting paid. You're getting money back. You can buy a piece of it today. You can own a tiny bit of a turbine, and when it's operational, which is spring of next year, 2021, you get your share of the electricity it generates supplied to your home. We're talking in economic terms. I'm going to let clever people explain to you how this works, but this is a totally new source of green energy. And it wasn't possible until Ripple made it happen. You can power your car and your home with electricity from your tiny bit of your very own wind farm. And Ripple, if you're a Ripple customer, you have a much bigger impact than most green tariffs. You can actually help to build brand new wind farms, and that is the main octopus. That is the next line that I'm trying to put out. The main object. The main object of the exercise is to increase the amount of specifically land-based wind power in the UK. And obviously that needs investment. And if the investment's coming from us, the consumers, and we benefit from it, that is a much better arrangement than getting an investment from some massive offshore bank that has a lot of dirty money that it's got from Russia. I'm just assuming that's where all dirty money comes from. I don't know. Probably some quite grubby money from America or the Cayman Islands. Anyway, it's us funding it. And you'll get a much bigger impact with that. This is the great thing, because these two things happen completely separately. I recorded the interview with Fiona Howarth from Octopus Energy 2 weeks ago. And now we've got this advert from Ripple Energy, who have partnered with Octopus Energy and Co-op Energy. To be fair, not just Octopus, Co-op Energy. So if you're already with Octopus, there's no need to do anything. The savings from your wind farm will be automatically applied to your bill once the wind farm starts operating. It works with specialist EV tariffs like Agile and Go, which you're just about to hear about, and you can get your savings from the Agile and Go tariffs plus the savings from the wind farm. This is insane. Ripple estimates you could save up to 25% on your electricity bill. So it's a cheaper, easier alternative to rooftop solar, which is really interesting. The amount of people who would love rooftop solar or would love in some way to generate renewable energy, this is a brilliant solution. So for a typical UK home, it costs around £1,800 to buy enough of the wind farm to cover your electricity consumption for 25 years. The upfront cost is about 65% cheaper than putting solar on your roof. And it doesn't matter if you rent an apartment or a house or you live in a flat. It doesn't matter. If you move, this investment goes with you. It doesn't stay in the building. Now, although the first wind farm that Ripple have invested in is in South Wales, obviously owners who invest into that wind farm can live anywhere in England, Scotland or Wales. The power is supplied via the grid. It goes all over the country. Ripple Energy is a really innovative company. It's really worth having a look at this at rippleenergy.com. It's a really innovative company. It was voted Startup of the Year by Cedars, who we know very well, and Business Green. Well, we've interviewed James Murray on this podcast in the past from Business Green. So some people who kind of understand the business and the clean energy sector. I'm really pleased that Ripple are sponsoring these episodes of the Fully Charged Show podcast. And I hope I've kind of explained it. It's quite, I think in terms of commercials, that's quite a long one, but because it's so interesting what they're doing. I think I'm going to try and get Sarah Merrick, who is the CEO of Ripple Energy, as a guest on the podcast in the future when it's not an advert. Although some of you will argue that it sounds like one, but it's going to be a really long, in-depth one. The longest in-depth advert ever in commercial broadcasting. Anyway, I'm going to shut up with this introduction and actually introduce the episode. So please welcome onto the Fully Charged Show podcast, Fiona Howarth, CEO of electric vehicles at Octopus Energy. So Fiona, thank you very much for taking time to do this, because I think now you've got to be, even now, surely manically busy, because Octopus just seems, the amount of tweets I get from people about their Agile Tariff, it's gone quiet again now, but there was a time when people were just obsessing about how much range they'd got into their car and how much they'd been paid to do it.
Yeah, we've seen some real wins, I think, over the last few weeks where people, have been paid £5 or whatever to charge enough miles to go from London to Newcastle and back, So it's like, amazing. Yeah, what would cost them maybe £100 in a petrol car? Yeah,
they're being paid to do it. But I think let's go back a bit because that is fascinating what's happening there. But so the last time we spoke was just a bit over a year ago. We did a podcast together in a very noisy Hay festival. So this is much quieter. The listeners will be pleased. It won't be quite as noisy as that. But since then, it feels to me like things have ramped up very quickly. There's lots of, and I think more and more people are aware that there are other ways of buying electricity. The understanding has increased even in that year. And I mean, because you hadn't launched the Agile Tariff then, back a year ago, was that?
We had.
I didn't know it was happening then.
Yeah, I'm trying to work it out. I think it might be over 2 years, since we launched that. And I think we launched the Agile Tariff first and then the Go Tariff. So both of them have been running maybe even a year by the time we caught up last year.
Wow.
But I think the big changes are things like, obviously we've got more EV drivers.
Yeah.
And then those EV drivers have also become a lot more knowledgeable and a lot smarter on how to charge their cars.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is, for example, people might switch onto the Go Tariff. So the Go Tariff is where you can get 4 hours of very cheap electricity in the middle of the night. And then they might see the Agile Tariff and they're like, wow, that's really flexible. So the Agile Tariff, for anyone that isn't familiar with it, is the one that follows the wholesale market price.
Yeah.
The energy market, you can see the energy price is changing on a half hour by half hour basis.
Yeah.
So typically it's inexpensive overnight, there's a small peak in the morning around about breakfast. It's inexpensive again in the middle of the day. And then there's a huge peak between kind of 4 and 7 p.m. And that's both because that's when there's a high amount of demand in terms of just generally for the energy, but also on the grid as well. So there's kind of additional costs for the local grid. So our kind of tariff follows that pattern most of the time. And actually, because the wholesale price, as you were saying, has gone negative, literally that tariff at those points has also gone negative. So people have literally been paid to charge up at that time. So those people that were on Go that were already enjoying kind of a predictable, inexpensive tariff to charge their car have now been watching people that have been on Agile and thinking, oh, that looks really interesting. And then in addition to that, there's some other things like, I think when we were speaking last year, we had maybe just launched a partnership with OME. So OME have a cable that have integrated with the Agile Tariff. So literally you can get like a type 2 to type 2 cable so that it can charge up using a standard type
wall
2
socket.
Or you can get it in actually with a 3-pin plug at the end, so you can literally plug it into your standard socket.
Right.
And they've got a box in the middle of the cable that talks to the cloud, and you get an app, and you can kind of come along and you say, okay, I'd like 20 kilowatt hours tonight. So that's roughly 3 hours of charging on a standard 7 kilowatt charger at home. So they're like, okay, 3 hours. And so they look at the data for that day and they're like, okay, the cheapest time tonight is between 11 p.m. and 12 p.m. and then 2 to 4 a.m.
Right.
And it literally switches it on at that time to charge and switches it off and switches it on and switches it off. So while you're sleeping, it's just optimizing your charging with energy pricing. So you don't even have to think about it. And then the next night, it might be between, say, 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Right. And again, it will just make it happen then. So it's just made it so easy.
Yes.
And so actually people have been picking up on this and they've been testing it and they've been trialing it. And as you say, they've been tweeting about it.
Yeah.
And then they spread the word. And I think what's fantastic about the EV community is you just get these real, evangelists, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And they're like, wow, look at this. Look what I could do. Everyone, you should try it too.
Yeah.
And it's just really exciting. So, I think over that bank holiday that we saw, prices dipped to minus 11 pence per kilowatt hour at some point. I mean, just bonkers.
It's crazy, isn't it? That's possible. Yeah.
And so the OME team kind of released some of their data on that in terms of what some of their customers have been experiencing and enjoying, really, in terms of what they've done. And we've heard stories of one person couldn't, already topped up his car and he got his dad round to socially distance, except to
plug his car in.
Plug his car in too. Exactly. But also brilliant is that, we also see tweets from people, from National Grid, from the system operator saying, thanks to the Octopus Energy customers that are helping balance the grid.
Yes.
Because they don't want to be turning wind turbines at times either. They want to be finding a way to flexibly balance the grid. And what's exciting is that if we can do it right now at small scale, then we can show how that would work when we have even more EVs on the road.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important when we start to kind of visualize what that world might look like when actually it's not just 100,000 EVs, pure EVs. It's like actually, the whole
millions,
30 million, actually how does that work? But also in a world where we have much more renewable energy as well. So, we're, as you alluded to earlier on coal, we're kind of amazing progress in coal over the last, 10, 20 years. Yeah. And then in terms of gas as well, can we get ourselves off gas? How great would that be?
Yeah.
And if we can move to a really fully balanced system, the fact is that wind blows when it blows, right?
Yeah.
And sun's in the middle of the day, but actually we still want to use energy in the evening when we're sitting watching TV or cooking dinner in the winter in the evenings. So actually, can we use the energy at the right time, store it at the right time, and then use it to kind of power our homes potentially and things like that. So
I mean, I think that the thing I want to sort of explore is that certainly, so I have a lot of friends in France and they are now quite jealous. I say a lot. I have got a lot of friends in France, only 2 I've spoken to in any detail, who have a sort of basic understanding of the French grid and the difference between us. So they don't have variable tariffs. They don't have nighttime because they are nuclear. So it's the same all the time. But they're always done my head in about well, we do nuclear, it's very clean. We have less carbons than England, blah, blah, blah. They've always been, and they've always been smugly nuclear. And now they still are. They're still very pro-nuclear, but they have not acknowledged that a fluctuating cost base, which is what's happened. I mean, that's what I wanted to check. As far as I understand it, that has happened entirely because of renewables. It's not because we've got more gas, for instance, or gas has replaced coal. It's because we've got such a plethora of renewables now that occasionally pushes the price negative. I mean, that's what's done it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a combination, actually. So it's actually around supply and demand, of course. So yes, we do see more renewables. So over that bank holiday weekend, we saw more wind. And of course, it was very sunny as well.
Yeah.
We had quite a lot of renewables there. But we also, over lockdown, we've seen a reduction in demand.
In demand, yeah.
Particularly on the industrial and commercial side. So actually, if we see a reduction in demand, so I think what's interesting, and I'd love to learn more about this, if anyone's listening and has knowledge on this, but in a world with nuclear, you can't switch it off, right? So in the middle of the night, you're still generating a lot of power.
Huge amounts.
But everyone's sleeping and not using that. Yeah. So presumably, there's also a mismatch of demand and supply at that point. So actually,
colossal.
Compared to, say, tea time peak that we were talking about, can you then save that in the middle of the night when people are sleeping to then use it at tea time so that you don't have to have other generation that ramps up at tea time, you know? And therefore,
because I don't know. Yes, you're right. We both would love to hear from some nuclear engineers, because what I've been told, and I've done, for instance, 2 talks, which were great fun, to the engineers at Sellafield. So the people who are actually running Sellafield, they were amazing. They were really good fun.
Great.
And I started each talk by waxing lyrical about the beauty of the massive wind farm I passed on my way up to the lake, which they were, one of them threw a bread roll at me. I mean, they were just, I do it on purpose, and it's all in good jest. But they've always said you can't turn a nuclear power station down. You can turn it off. But the thing that I do know is, I know Belgium, and I've read this very recently, Belgium keeps all its lights on, and they have a lot of them on their motorway system, on their freeway system, throughout the whole of Belgium to use the power.
Oh, mad.
So they keep them on at night when there's no traffic, and right out in the middle of the country. And because there's been complaints in Belgium about light pollution by people who live out in the sticks. Yeah. And they've got this brilliant light, and they're really bright lights, and they use as much energy as they can.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I've never even. I mean, it's a really good point. That made me think. I read that a couple of weeks ago about Belgian motorways. You can see they like glow when you're from the space station. There's lights on. You see Paris, you'll see Brussels. And you go, what are those really bright lines in Belgium?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they'd probably do it in France as well. I don't know.
You must just be thinking, sitting there as a resident in Belgium and an EV driver, you're like, don't power those motorway lights in the middle of the night when no one's there. Just charge my car.
Charge my car for very little money. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Or none. Yeah. No, I mean, that is interesting how that changes. But it is also, I think, the first time I heard about negative pricing was in Germany a few years ago, because they had so much more at that stage wind installed, onshore wind.
Yeah.
And I do remember reading about that and thinking that is barking mad. That, and worrying and thinking that might be the reason we can't have renewables, because it messes up the economy, and the economics don't work. Because the economics of it, of the grid and of electricity generating and consumption, I mean, it's only really clever people like you who would go into that business. Because honestly, I would look at the spreadsheet that describes the cost of generating, transmitting and consuming, and I would have a meltdown. I could not cope with it.
I think it's really exciting. I mean, I've spent time actually with big energy companies about a decade ago, where they were talking about this world with, fluctuating renewable energy and more EV. Right. And they were talking about having all of these, gas-fired power stations sitting around the country idle, very expensive, being paid
for when they're idle. That's what people don't realise. Yeah.
And so that basically at certain times of the year where we might be at home, maybe all at home at the same time on a cold day, cooking or watching TV or whatever, that these would power up
Yeah.
And so for that time of year, they're saying, actually, we're going to pay about £50 on average over the year, so that at that hour, we can all enjoy our electricity. And I was like, that doesn't really make sense. I think if you and I were asked, do you want to use electricity right now and pay £50 for it, or would you like to wait and do it in an hour?
Yeah.
And you can get that £50 back. I'd probably just wait an hour.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, what do we need to kind of do that? Well, we need, transparent pricing. We need pricing signals for consumers. And I think for all of the stick that the smart meter program in the UK has had, what is amazing about smart meters is that now we can have time of use pricing for homes.
Yes.
And so actually we can see that. And with smart meters, so one of the other things we did over one of the Maybank holiday weekends was, for all of the customers we had on smart meters, over 100,000 of them, we said, actually, even if you have an EV or not, even, you may or may not be on Go or Agile, but you might just have a standard tariff. But actually on this day, we will pay you guys as well to use energy at these times, because we see that in the market. So actually we had people, even without EVs, that were
running tumble dryers or
turning on tumble dryers and washing machines. I loved one tweet which was like, only using, I think there was a 7-year-old daughter who had persuaded her mum that she should be playing video games at 7 a.m. in the morning, because actually by playing video games she was getting paid for it because she was using electricity. But I think the tweet went on to say, and I didn't even notice because I was too busy putting on the washing machine and the tumble dryer. What was great though is you could see this shift, these users changing their behaviour because they had been given a price signal to do it. And actually, so smart meters have totally unlocked that. And we kind of think about it as like the plastic bag tax, but almost like the reverse, right? So people have often said, oh, no one will change their behaviour for a few pence here or a few pence there. But actually, if you think about plastic bags, and 5 pence for a plastic bag changed overnight. Yeah. And now we're seeing the same with energy pricing, which is really...
the thing that is annoying in a sense is that it's taken me, and I've kind of been immersed in this world of electricity supply and electric cars and plugs and all that for quite a long time, and I was very about smart meters because of the way they were presented. One, the way they were presented; two, the actual technology that I witnessed.
Yeah.
And if you look at your phone, and I mean the apps I've got on my phone that control my hot water, the car charging, the batteries. Yeah. It's really simple and graphically sophisticated.
Yeah.
It's up to date with the software that runs on smartphones. And every time I've seen a smart meter, it's a little plastic box with sort of, I don't even know what they were called, a Game Boy. It's Game Boy level graphics, which I can remember my nephew, who's now 42, he had a Game Boy and he was so excited about it. And there was a little worm that went up and around a corner. It wasn't very...
I love Game Boys, but they were of their time.
Yes, they were of their time. But that has been a frustration. But actually what I would love to have heard when they were first introduced was, the reason we want you to have a smart meter is because the price of electricity goes up and down, and you can take advantage of that with one, and you can't without. You can have cheaper electricity. It was never quite sold as that. And so there was that classic sort of anti-vax knee-jerk reaction of going, this government knows too much about me. Like you're going to boil a kettle, and if the government knows, is that going to destroy your basic human rights? I don't think so.
I think it's really tough because the government have asked energy companies to roll these out. And actually a lot of the energy companies at this point in time can't offer time of use tariffs in the same way. So the technology in which their systems are running, unfortunately, don't support it today. And so actually we need to be able to have those systems along with the smart meter, be able to have these time of use tariffs. But it is exciting for us because, again, I've come from a world in which working with other energy companies where it can be really hard, as you say, to persuade people to take smart meters. They're like, well, why? What's the benefit?
Yes, yeah.
But actually in a world where, as you say, you're going to get cheaper electricity, you're going to be able to charge up with inexpensive renewable energy at the right times. Yeah. You're like, yeah, great. I want that. It's a much, so we have a pull, we can't get them in quick enough.
Right.
That's the challenge for us.
Yes. That's really good. And then, the other things are, because I don't know, this shows my ignorance and you can be angry with me, but I assume that Octopus is a sort of renewable energy company in the vast, I don't know, is it the vast majority, or is it 100%, or is it, I can't remember.
Absolutely, no, 100%.
100%, right. Because I mean, that does seem to be I mean, and that is an equally difficult thing to understand, which I think we did discuss the last time, that the electron you actually consume that runs your LED light bulb could come from Norway or soon, once they've fixed the wire, or from Denmark, or from the Netherlands, or from a gas power station, or from nuclear, or from my solar panels. I always think when Mrs. Johnson over the road, although she's now moved out, put on her tumble dryer on a sunny day, she was probably using my electrons because they were going out into the grid. Not anymore, because I use them all here. I'm like Scrooge. I'm a Scrooge with the electrons. But yeah, I mean, that's always hard to understand. But then it's always, whenever I meet anyone that works in electricity supply, they get it. And it's not that hard to understand. So if you sell a kilowatt hour of electricity to customer A, you're buying a kilowatt hour of electricity from supplier B, who's got wind turbines, solar panels.
That's it. And so we want to make sure that we are, and we do make sure that we're always buying from somebody that has wind or solar or some other accredited.
And at the moment then, are there enough kilowatts coming from renewable suppliers to supply your customers? I mean,
Yeah, no, there are. And I think actually we would like to encourage more. So I think there's a lot of work that we're doing to look at local community energy projects or other distributed energy. I think one of the things that we announced a few weeks back was that we're looking at setting up a future energy research centre, which will look at, imagine a world where we'd always started with renewable energy. What would that look at? And also I think there's things that you do maybe more locally, for example, that you might think about, a bit like you were saying, you're powering neighbours' houses and that kind of stuff, which actually mitigates some of the need for some of the infrastructure upgrades that we might need on our networks and grids and things. So actually we're now trying to think about it much more broadly, much bigger picture around what that would look like, so that we can work with the industry and work with government and the regulator and so forth to kind of paint that picture around what it might look like. I think what's interesting is that people have never felt that the price, I don't think, of their electricity, for example, has been in debate. So a lot of people probably don't actually know what they pay for electricity.
No, I didn't know before I had electric cars. I had no idea. Wouldn't have been able to tell you. Yeah.
And if you speak to friends that have petrol or diesel cars today, you're like, what's the price at your local pump?
Yeah.
They will know what their price of petrol is or what their price of diesel is. And then if you ask those same friends, what do they pay per kilowatt hour? They probably have no idea.
Yeah.
Scroll forward 5 or 10 years and they've been driving their EV for a couple of years. I am sure that they will know.
They will know.
It's really fascinating because it makes it so tangible. It's like, actually to drive to, whether for my commute or however much I'm putting in my vehicle each week, people know that stuff.
Yeah.
And they start to engage in it in a different way. And actually they start to ask questions like you are around, why is it like cheaper in the middle of the night? Why is it more expensive between 5 and 7, that kind of stuff? Start to engage in it a bit more, which I think is really exciting because I think that points to some of the changes we can make. I think also in terms of losses, I think there are other benefits as well with having some of the big distributed local distributors also having larger facilities. And I think when you're in an economy where you value nuclear, then obviously that has to come at a certain scale, etc. So therefore you make trade-offs around transmission and distribution. But I think we can definitely be a lot smarter on more local stuff as well as we go forward.
No, I mean, it is that. I think that the transmission losses are more an argument about localized generating, and the people who go, well, who will say, solar or wind turbines, they're inefficient or whatever. There's some really weird arguments you get because there are some think tanks that are funded by some people who might possibly sell gas and oil, who've just churned these ideas around all to try and find an angle to go, wait a minute, when the wind blows you're wasting some of it because it has to be transmitted. Yes, like all electricity. I saw that an argument that the transmission losses from offshore wind to back to the land, you make it ridiculous. Well, that's exactly this. It's no different. And in fact, then there's a counter argument that because the cables are under the sea and cooler, they actually have less losses than cables that are up in the sky. When on a hot sunny day, I didn't know that the transmission losses are higher than on a cold winter's day.
Yeah.
I didn't
know. There you go. I didn't.
I don't think it's like trillions of gigawatts. I think you can measure it. There is a difference, but who knows? But anyway, sorry, that's going off on a bit of a tangent. But I guess
the other thing is because it's just the wind power. Actually, if you lose a bit of it, I suppose it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter as much. I think what's interesting is the smart grid. If you can enable smart, flexible grids, is that actually I think in terms of if we don't have a smart grid, I think there are stats around up to £40 billion will be required in investment in UK networks.
So to actually upgrade the wires, as it were.
Upgrade the wires so that we can go to a world in which we have things like EVs, heat pumps, and we have a net zero carbon economy. So actually, if we don't do it, we've got to invest all this money. And if we move to a smart grid, we can save that 40 billion. 40 billion is
it's quite a lot of money
in terms of infrastructure upgrades.
And when you say smart grid, that isn't just smart meters in your own home. That is
it's like
a lot of other technologies.
Use it a bit like we were saying earlier, so that we can balance that consumption and supply, so that we can do it in a smart way, so that actually we're consuming it when the wind's blowing and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
we aren't. So I guess one worst case scenario.
Yes.
Worst case scenario, you don't have agile pricing and everyone gets home from work around about 5. I recognise that's a kind of pre-COVID image.
Yes.
But if everyone gets home at 5 o'clock, which is peak time, and this is, let's say 2030, National Grid estimated there'd be up to 11 million EVs on the road.
Right.
11 million EVs all plugged in on a 7 kilowatt charger at home. That's 77 gigawatts.
Right.
To put that in context, at the same time, the UK peak consumption is about 62, I think.
At the moment, yeah.
I mean, it's probably changed again in COVID, but if you take it, we basically over doubled our peak consumption. So obviously our grids aren't set up to get that much electricity to our homes at that time.
And sorry, just to quickly go back, that's 7 million EVs.
That's 11 million.
11 million EVs, which is really, extremely plausible. That is not it's not like saying 100 million.
It's a third of the cars on the road. A third of the vehicles on the road today.
And also, I think the other thing that will happen sooner anyway, which is more, in a sense, an equal or greater challenge, is buses, trucks, delivery vans. They're going to be electric way before most private cars.
Yeah.
I think taxis, all those service vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, all of these vehicles, and to go to net zero, we're expecting an even much bigger proportion of them to go electric as well over the decade after that. So, I mean, it's a big demand on our local grid. But actually, what we just do is instead of charging them at 5 to 7 when we're all cooking tea and that kind of stuff, and we do it in the middle of the night, we talk about it almost as like trains, right? Actually, the trains at peak time, if you didn't have to jump on a train at peak time and use that same carriage, you wouldn't do that. You don't want to squeeze everyone in. You just use it off peak times, and so those trains can still run in the middle of the night. And so you just use it then when it's cheap and inexpensive. So actually, that's what we mean is like actually the equivalent of the train network is our grid, and therefore let's just use it to charge our cars in the middle of the night when it's not being used for other stuff.
But and it's also that stuff that, without question, someone who's not in the least bit interested in electric vehicles or electricity or the grid or any of those nerdy things that I quite enjoy, would buy an electric car, say in 2030, they get their first electric car in 2030 and they plug it in and they look at their electricity bill and go, blimey, that costs a lot. Oh, hang on. If I charge it at night, it's cheaper.
That's it.
It's not going to take a lot, because the cars, 90% of electric cars I've driven the last 5 years have a little timer for when you don't even need an external thing. If nothing else, you plug it in at 6 o'clock when you get home. It doesn't charge until midnight. I mean, that is really simple to arrange. It's not a complicated thing.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And if you've got something like an Ohmic, that's that technology, the next step in a sense, that you've got something where you don't know anything, but that's the socket you plug the car into, and that's the one on the wall, and you plug it in, and the cable does everything else. It becomes very sensible. Yeah.
Well, and of course, one thing we haven't spoken about much is vehicle to grid.
It was on my list.
Well, I like to talk about smart charging first because it's so simple and it's happening today. And So we're doing this vehicle to grid project, which is in partnership with people like the Energy Savings Trust and others, and it's supported by Innovate UK, which is fantastic. And what it's meant is that we can offer a bundle today, which albeit is subsidised, but it's what it would look like in a few years' time when we get prices of the chargers to come down a bit.
Right.
And we can get more value out of the grid because we'll have more flexible pricing mechanisms for the grid. So what we've done is we're testing now what's the uptake on a competitive price for a bundle of a Nissan Leaf, a charger, and a good energy tariff.
Right.
And so we've got a really competitive bundle with this market-leading vehicle to grid charger in that bundle, and it's provided by Wallbox. So Wallbox is a company, they're based near Barcelona, and they've created the world's smallest, lightest V2G charger.
Right, because they were originally very big boxes.
Oh,
they're like phone box size almost. They were big, weren't they?
When we first started looking at this, they were like 6 foot tall. And, and my team were talking to me about how we were going to have to dig 2 feet of concrete into the ground and make assessments for wind shear and all this kind of stuff. I was like, how am I going to encourage people to put these on their driveway? It's like huge boxes. And then they turned into kind of air conditioning boxes, which are about kind of waist height. Yeah. Now this one is kind of, the length.
Well, they're wall mounted now, aren't they? They're kind of a wall mounted unit. Yeah.
And it's kind of like from my elbow to my fingers, that kind of size. And it just looks so much better. And so these chargers we're rolling out in this bundle, and actually for people that are plugging in their car, they need to plug in their car, I think, overnight at least 12 times in a month, and they'll just get £30 back.
Wow. And they don't do anything else. It just does everything else for them.
Yeah, so we just manage that in the background. It's a leased car, so they're not kind of thinking about the impact on any residual value or anything like that, which also we think will be minimal because we can manage that. But it just takes away that kind of, question. And so it's all managed for them. We kind of, we might charge it up when it's cheaper, or we might release it back to the grid, back to the house when it's expensive, to kind of balance that. And then we'll charge it up again, ready for them for the morning. So you'll say, actually, Fiona, I need to leave the house at 7 a.m. Make sure I've got 80% of my car by 7 a.m. And we'll just make sure that happens. So you've always got reliable charging.
Yeah. That's such a brilliant thing to do, because when I've explained vehicle to grid to my non-electric vehicle owning neighbours or people I know, if they, I try not to bring up the topic so that I do still get invited back to dinner in pre-COVID times without being, oh God, that boring bloke who goes, nah. But so I'll wait till someone asks, but that fascinates people, the concept of it, who've never had anything to do with electric, don't know anything about them, that you can have enough, and you have to explain that the idea isn't that you've got a battery that's full and then the national grid come and take all of it.
No, that's definitely
steal it. That they take a little bit, but it is that, I can't remember who explained that to me, but if there were, I think the idea was 10 million electric vehicles that were plugged into vehicle to grid systems, and the grid could take 1 kilowatt hour from each, which is 4 or 5 miles range, 3, 4, 5 miles range. That's 10 gigawatts. Which is more than we can produce in numerous power stations at the moment. It's an astonishing amount of power. So it was for a short period of time. It's not that long, but...
Well, if you take that scenario that we were talking through a few minutes ago, that those 11 million EVs, but in the worst case, they're charging up at that time and taking 77 gigawatts.
Yeah.
Say now they are releasing at that time.
Right.
That's all of the energy that we are...
So they could deliver 77 gigawatts.
That's the grid. That's more than we need.
That's way more than we could ever possibly need. So
and that's only a third of the EVs on the road. So actually, a third of the
cars that are currently on the road. Yes.
So let's say we had a whole EV fleet. You'd only need a fraction of them to be plugged in, releasing back to the grid. And then you've got huge flexibility in your consumption and demand.
Yes.
And so actually, then you can really be very flexible. Then it really doesn't matter when the wind is blowing.
No.
Because your EV kind of portfolio can just smooth all of that out.
Yeah.
So you can have then a super efficient energy system. And you could be literally, storing from your solar panels.
Yeah. Which is what I do now. I use, this year has been exceptional because, it's been a great experiment, because normally I don't have time to faff about or think about it because I'm off working, or I come back and I'm working here. But I've had time to kind of sit like a dunderhead and look at my energy consumption. But the point is that I haven't used grid electricity to charge my cars now until 2 nights ago, when I had to charge Judy's car so that she could drive to Bristol to move my daughter from her student house to her new flat, all that stuff. Well, that is incredible. That's the first time I've used any grid electricity. Now, that, you put that in context, we're using way less than we normally would. So that is unusual.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because essentially what's happened in your home is the marginal cost of that electricity has just plummeted, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically getting free electricity now from your solar because the upfront cost has been made. And so in that kind of world, if you can store it, I mean, literally it's kind of, well, what can I do with it? You could have electric patio heaters, for example, in the evening, right? You can store that. And so actually it becomes a very different monetary value.
Yeah.
And actually, if you take that up to a different scale, all of a sudden that marginal cost for extra electricity is negligible.
Yes.
So actually people will be able to access very cheap electricity at times. And they could, for example, store it up, and, then you don't have to worry about how much you're using and that kind of thing. It's just
all those, what you realize, I mean, all I want now is heat batteries, which I'm hoping I will get this year, because we've already do it with with water. So our water heater is an immersion heater, a Mixergy tank, is amazing. It does really work well. But we use that to store excess power, excess solar. So it heats all the water. Now, there are times that I'll look at the water heater thing, and it's red. It's absolutely as hot as it can get. And it's absolutely full. It's enough for about 20 showers.
Yeah.
And there's still more solar. This was when it was very sunny, and because I thought we need to, so you realize that it's exceptional now, the position we're in, but it won't be. Yeah. And particularly if people start building houses. This is my big bugbear at the moment. If they built houses with the same system that we have in this house or similar, which would the cost of it would be negated, because of you're building 1,000 houses, then you have 1,000 solar roofs, 1,000 batteries. When you're doing that stuff at that sort of scale. Yeah. But the benefit to people, and that's always the other thing that makes me furious, is when people go, well, it's all right for you and your middle class elitist celebrity bubble. I think that's the list. That you can, of course, I've been very privileged to be able to afford to do these things, to find out about them. But the point is, when they are built into the houses, where the affordable housing, where the power bills are massively lower than they would be if they had gas boilers and no solar panels. These are houses, the whole roof is solar. They have ground source heating. The pump that drives the ground source heating only comes from the solar and has batteries in each house, all that stuff. And they're talking single figure monthly power bills and heating.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's fantastic. I think the heating question is a big one.
That is a massive elephant in the room.
And it's interesting. So we've been talking about the grid, and often there are conversations where I have with people that are, working within the grid operators and things. And I say, how worried are you? And they're like, we're just not worried about EVs. That's all right. Really good. What's interesting is when you layer electric heating on top. Yeah. And how that looks. And so when you're thinking about, say, the Agile Tariff that we've got, then actually heat pumps. We're looking at how do you, link in heat pumps and things and store and heat up people's homes when electricity is inexpensive, and when you've got an oversupply of electricity and that kind of thing. And then how do you balance between the heat pump and the car and all, there's some really clever things I think that we'll see coming down the road in the next few years on this. Yeah. But what's interesting is that I think there was a stat that I saw that if we swap out our gas heating systems to electric heating systems at the rate we're going, it's going to take us between 1,000 and 2,000 years.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but that's so horrific.
Isn't it? And then it's really got me thinking about it. So at what point do people switch their heating system? And of course, actually, it's such a reactive purchase, isn't it? Yeah. It's like when your boiler breaks. And actually, at that point, you're not going to spend time naturally just looking around to be like, oh, what?
It's cold. You want a boiler.
It's cold. You want to be able to have hot showers. And it's interesting. How do we change that so that actually people are ready for that? So that actually at the point when their boiler breaks or they have problems with it, they can just go, okay, here's a clean alternative. Because the other stat as well that I saw in the same presentation actually was that between 40 and 50% of people don't realise that their gas boiler is contributing to carbon emissions.
Yeah, no, they don't think about it at all.
No, so people don't even realise that swapping their boiler for a new boiler is going to have that impact on the environment. So, and I think they would change their behaviours otherwise. The whole life cost you've got to look at for EVs. It's similar with heating, isn't it? Where actually, I think if you look at the upfront cost, then it's actually much cheaper to run over time.
Yes.
But again, then when, in the EV space, we obviously do leasing now, so that actually you can spread that cost over the life in which you're using your car. And actually, maybe we need something similar in the heating space where actually you can lease, for example, that
clever. So you lease heat in a way.
So actually, and I've seen people thinking about, do you pay for comfort rather than you pay for a boiler and you pay for installation, actually you pay for comfort. And actually then you can do, you say, I would always like this temperature in my house.
Yeah.
But then actually the heating system just makes sure you get that temperature, but they, take the electricity to create that heat at the times that it's most appropriate.
Yes. Fiona, you have been brilliant. I feel I want you to come do more, and I want to have better questions.
I know, it's great.
But I've really enjoyed it, and it's always good to we should definitely do it annually. I want an annual update on what Octopus is.
I'm sad we're not at Hay this year.
I know, or anywhere else come to that, but
And wow, we've really missed Fully Charged.
Yes. Oh, I know. Don't even. Yeah. I mean, there's some exciting things happening in October.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is good fun. And I must have gone about it too much. Well, no, it does look like it's happening. The electric drive-in cinema. Yeah. Oh my God, that is so exciting. So we're definitely doing it. What we don't know is if we can get the technology to the site that we can run the entire lighting, the cinema, the projection, the localized FM sound stuff, so you can listen to it in your car. We don't know if we can get that running off 6 Nissan Leafs. That technology exists.
Yeah.
And it's whether we can arrange to have all, that's an extra layer of
be amazing.
But it would be great if it was running off electric cars and you're watching them. But they're proper movies.
Yeah,
and inside, so we're going to do 3
chargers, right? We should get some of our V2G chargers, and I think that's probably in conversation, isn't it?
Oh, is it? That sounds like a conversation. Oh,
that does sound like.
That's exciting. We'll have that offline. We don't want our listeners hearing that. That's very exciting. But what I'm excited about is that it's proper movies, and we can do it. It doesn't matter about the weather because we can drive inside. The thing I'm confused about at the moment, and I've been told it's not a problem, is just say it's really heavy rain that day and you drive up to this massive building in your electric car.
Yeah.
And you wait in the queue outside and then you're beckoned to go in and you drive inside. Your wheels in that car are going to be dripping water onto a very beautifully polished concrete floor surface, which could then become quite slippery for pedestrians. I don't know. There is apparently there's matting available that you can drive over that absorbs.
That's clever.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a way around it, but I just suddenly thought, if there's 200, like one car, you wouldn't even notice. 10 might not, but 250, 300 electric cars in.
You've got a crack team there doing.
We've got a crack team. They are amazing.
Yeah, I'd back them to solve that one for you. Yeah.
I quite liked the fact that I brought that topic up because they hadn't thought about it, and that was good. And then they went, "Yeah, it's not a problem." Okay, thank you.
They'll solve it. They're problem solvers.
But so we're doing that in Farnborough in October, and then somewhere like around Leeds, I think, in November, and then somewhere in Scotland in early December. Great. Drive-in cinemas with first-run movies, proper movies. Because I wanted 1960s black and white French art house films with subtitles.
I was wondering if you're going to be showing, carbon-related documentaries.
Well, the 2 films I think we should show are Cars v Bikes. I don't know if you've seen that because I've watched that one.
I haven't.
It's an amazing film.
Watch it.
It's depressing, but also incredible. It's basically about big cities that aren't London, all over the place. So in South America, in Los Angeles. Los Angeles had raised wooden cycle viaducts all over Los Angeles that thousands of people would ride along. So you're up above the ground, they were flat.
Yeah.
And where the ground was sort of with little hills and dimmocks, you just cycled flat on a wooden bridge, I suppose. like a highway, like a bicycle highway, and there's bits of it still exist. This would have been built in the early part of last century, and it was all electric trams or bicycles. That's how Los Angeles was built. And when you see this film, they're rediscovering where this was, the local people, and they want to rebuild it so you can cycle out away from traffic. But it's a great film. But I watched it where you had to take turns pedaling static bikes to generate the electricity to run the projector to watch the film.
Yeah.
So there were people at the back of the room all the way through it going,
I love it. It's like,
yeah. So that one, Who Killed the Electric Car, Cars v Bikes, and then James Bond. What a great evening. Well, that's all, but I really think that was a fascinating discussion. We are definitely going to be covering all the notions of agile tariffs and negative pricing on the Fully Charged Show on YouTube very, very soon. It's an extraordinary area. Who would have known it was even remotely possible? Very, very exciting what's happening in that area against a very complicated backdrop. But certainly electricity supply is going through quite a tumultuous shift. Next week's episode, I know what it is. We're that professional. It's a very, very interesting talk with a man called Gerard Barron. He is an extraordinary Australian man who has done an enormous amount in his life, and he's still young, and he's got a lot of hair, and he's very handsome, and he goes around the world on ships and things. Anyway, he is going to explain how there are enough metals that we really need, the kind of metals that everyone talks about when they're discussing batteries. There are enough of those on the surface of the planet. I'm going to leave it that, on the surface of the planet, to power billions of electric vehicles and have multi-petawatts of electricity storage. They're on the surface of the planet. That's all I'm going to say. It is the most fascinating story. You must not miss next week's episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. And one really good way of not doing that is by subscribing. Please do subscribe to this podcast on whatever your favorite podcast download application happens to be. So that's it. Thank you so much. If you want to have a look at our Patreon support page, you certainly can, but I wouldn't apply any pressure on you to do so. It's entirely up to you. There are links in the show notes for this episode. And that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening.